episode of Roll or Die. We have a treat for you today, viewers and listeners. We have the head coach of Bayside BJJ and one of my old teammates, actually, from back from Devine days, Pete Polygenis. Thanks for joining us, Pete.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, brother. The first thing I notice about you is that amazing hairstyles. You know, I like. How long have you been shaving your head for? Let's cut to the important stuff first, man.
Well, yeah. It's actually funny you say. So I'd probably say it's probably about 5 years now.
Yeah.
You know, the hair was thinning a bit and I was getting a little bit self-conscious about it. And then I was actually, I was talking to one of my mate's wives and she kept staring at my scalp and it really got me. And I went home crying and I said, I've got to shave, but I've got to get rid of it. And yeah, it's best hairstyle in the world, mate. Nothing to worry
Absolutely.
about.
So practical. So practical.
And it's the hairstyle of choice for jiu-jitsu guys, isn't it? Like, if you were to describe someone like shaved head, maybe a couple of tattoos, it's like, which one? You know?
Yeah, you can't describe a person like that.
It's so funny you actually mentioned that because we just this last week we had Peter Devine over at our club for a seminar and we did a promotion for one of the guys, Rob, who got his black belt. Rob the firefighter, you may know. Yep. So he got his black belt, and we've got one of the kids who's just moved into the adult class. So he's 14, and he came up to me at some point. He said, "Is being bald a condition of having your black belt?" And there was like 6-7 black belts there, and every single one of us was bald. And I was like, someone even made the joke that we should be called balding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu rather than Bayside.
Balding Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Actually, that does surprise me though, because like a lot of people think Jiu-Jitsu is a young person's game, but my understanding is that the numbers of participation, and I might be wrong about this, so don't quote me, but I understand that the actual masters are a really strong force in Jiu-Jitsu. Like we are, even though we feel like a minority, so many gyms are just full of masters. They don't even have young people. Like we've had people on the show who don't have kids in their gym or even young adults. They're all old people, you know? So
wow.
Yeah.
I'd probably say for us, it's almost close to 20% of our students, as far as that 20% of our adult students are over 40.
Okay.
And I'm honored to say at the moment that our most regular training student at the moment is a 63-year-old black belt.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, it's amazing. So Ian, he's an absolute monster. He comes in twice a day and he's 63. It's really impressive.
That's squad goals for me right there. That's amazing. Absolutely. When I grow up, I want to be just like that guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think jiu-jitsu is actually quite a hard sport for younger people, really, unless you start when you're a kid. It can be pretty hard to get into it when you're in your like late teens or early 20s. I know that a lot of people that's the age when people kind of want to do it. But from what I see, I think that's the age that people drop off the most. What do you reckon, Pete?
I actually think that after all these years, I mean, so my club now, Base, has been running for just over 7 years. And I always thought that the bulk of students would be in that like 18 to 21-year-old category. And I'm actually shocked to see how few people you see in that, especially like close to 18, 19. Not a lot. I guess there's obviously a lot of things you can be doing with your time. But not saying that we don't have a few that show up, but yeah, it's really shocking to me how underrepresented that category is, including even like 17-year-olds and stuff. We've got a few of them, but I always thought it'd be a hell of a lot more.
What's the most?
It takes a special kind of person, I think, to do it at that age. When I think about some of the guys or girls that we've had on our podcast who are that age, like Angus Tonkin, Adele Fornerino, those sort of people, they're pretty mature, and unfortunately, that doesn't always happen for everybody at that age. Sorry, Anton, I cut you off.
No, I agree. I think it requires that consistency of training, and if you don't have it, you feel like you're plateaued and you're stuck. So what's the point? So I can totally see how that would happen. I was just interested to know. Yeah, sorry. What's the most represented category in your gym?
Well, I'd probably say that it's a bit of a spread. Like we've got a pretty broad age group, but I'd probably say that I'm almost with the kids classes. It's our sort of 10 to 15 classes that are absolutely chockers.
Mhm.
And I'd probably say the majority of those kids are not in the older part of that group either. So probably more like 12, 13. I
They
reckon
love it at that age. They really do. It's like, because you're a kid to be a monkey. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got, I keep getting inquiries from people who have like 3-year-olds and things like that. So we don't start the kids until they're 5. And that's for good reason. I mean, we've had lots of younger kids come in. It's always a disaster.
Yeah.
So when parents call me, they're like, "Oh, my kid's just turned 3 or 4, and I want to come in." I'm like, "Yeah, just give them a little bit more time."
Yeah.
But I'd probably say, as far as the adults go, yeah, we've got a really, really broad age group. But I'd probably say that people start to linger back in once they're over 20, rather than so there's 17 and 18, you hardly see any, but then 20 and above. And I'd probably say that late 20s is probably the biggest group we've got.
Right.
For me, I actually started jiu-jitsu the week I turned 18. So I finished school, and my birthday's towards that, end of October. And then I started jiu-jitsu literally at the end of October that year.
Wow.
So I've been, it was literally when I turned 18. So
Yeah.
Tell us about that, Pete. How'd you discover it?
Yeah, actually, funnily enough, it's I used to go to Melbourne High, and we had free periods, and probably a lot of the jiu-jitsu people don't know, but I was actually a really obsessed soccer player. So I used to be that kid that had a ball under his arm everywhere I went, and I used to play soccer non-stop. I was my school soccer captain in year 12. So what happened for me was I really loved martial arts, and I always wanted to do them. And initially I started a karate club, opened down the street from my house. And what people might not know is my dad's completely anti-martial arts.
Wow.
So completely, like
rebellion right here.
My dad's mission in life is to spread world peace, and in a big way. Like, he's written a book on Olympian peace, and he's had a statue built for world peace, and he calls it, the Statue of Olympian peace in Greece on Olympus. So funnily enough, I used to actually pretend I was going to a friend's house and sneak down the street and go to a karate club.
Amazing.
And I did that for a little while. And then after about 6 months, my brother told on me. And by that point, I think my dad was a bit annoyed, but he didn't have too much of an issue. So I went there. And then at school one day during free period, one of the guys I knew brought in it was the World Combat Championship. It was an early MMA event with Henzo Gracie. And I was watching it, through the eyes of somebody who's doing karate. And I couldn't wrap my head around how this tiny little guy was just mauling everybody so easily. Like, I don't think any of the matches went for more than 2 minutes with him. And I thought, oh, wow, I'd really love to give that a go. Like, that looks fantastic. So this goes back to 1996. Was that year. So I put in my, back in my mind, thinking, okay, one day I'd love to do that, try that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff. And then fast forward to later in the year, and somebody tells me, hey, Peter DeBean, who I've never heard of at that point, there's a guy who's opened a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club in Hyatt. And I'm like, no way. And it's like, yeah, in Hyatt, you should check it out. It was at Kimakai. There's on Hyatt Road in Hyatt. So I lived in Cheltenham, so I wasn't very far away.
That's awesome.
And so literally it was the week I finished high school. And then literally the 30th of October, 1996 was my first session. And I went in and gave it a crack. And I'd love to say that I, fell in love with it and I was totally blown away. But like everybody else, I spent the first 3 months getting my butt kicked. Everybody else was like, older. They were all black belts in other martial arts. They were, tough, strong guys. So like everybody else, I spent my time getting my ass kicked for months. And then when I was just about to give it up, I was about 70 kilo, and a guy came in who was 120 kilo, and I tapped him out in 40 seconds. And then I got him again in side control to the point he was a puddle and he couldn't handle it anymore. And I remember walking away from that session going, okay, now I get it. I didn't even know it was working, to be honest, until that moment. And from that point on, I've been absolutely hooked.
Amazing. And what about your your dad's views now that your martial arts has gone on such a journey? What did his views towards martial arts and their benefits or anything like that, and also their impact on peace or not peace, did any of that shift over time?
I'd love to say yes, but no. For me, I competed a lot earlier on, and every competition I would go and I'd do quite well and win and whatever. Every single time he'd go, congratulations, you won the competition. It's a good time to quit now. You can give it up. So that was my experience. Yeah, he was always trying to get me to quit, basically. Yeah, so
I feel
nowadays, it's a business, and he can see that I've got a lot of students, and of course he can see that I really love my job. So now he's quite relaxed about it, but up until it was my job, he always encouraged me to quit.
Amazing.
I feel you. My mum's been the same. She's like, why don't you stop this madness of jiu-jitsu now and just settle down? And, unfortunately, it's not happening. Do you mind if I ask, is it from is your background Greek? Are you from a strict, is it a fairly strict Greek background or no?
Very, very much. So my dad was a Greek school principal who ran Greek schools for many, many years. For those who don't know, my surname Polygenis actually means many facial hairs.
Oh, wow.
So people have
it doesn't mean many head hairs, otherwise that would be a real problem.
Well, there you go. I couldn't hold up to that. But even that, for me, I'm probably like one of the least hairy Greeks going around. So even many facial hairs didn't really work that well. But yeah, so no, very, very strict Greek upbringing and everything, and it's he, as I said, he's not into the martial arts at all, and it's been a funny journey on that front.
But that story is awesome. So potentially, if that 120 kilo guy had not come in, you may have walked away and not continued on with jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely, because I literally spent 3 months just getting my butt handed to me, and I hadn't really felt that it was sinking in as yet, which it's so common too. And I went in and I couldn't believe how easily I beat him. Yeah. And then I'm just scratching my head going, wow, 10 seconds ago I thought this stuff didn't work. And now he's a guy that's 50 kilo heavier than me, and I'm just tearing him apart. Like that was a big eye-opening moment for me. Like it was the little reinforcement I needed.
There's a lot to be said for, like, I think it's really important as far as a ratio, and I'd value you two as much higher belts than me input on this, but I think rolling with people who are less trained than you is a really important part of the training strategy. Like, you don't want to get your ass kicked every single roll because you can't see your improvements. You can't practice things. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I basically subscribe to the theory that essentially, if you're taking on people who are better than you, you're more or less working on your defensive skills. And when you get a chance to take on people who are not as good as you, you've got a good chance of practicing your offensive skills. So it's like, using the example of, I want to practice my triangles. You're not going to get somebody who's, a belt or two higher than you and, get a good opportunity to get triangles left, right, and center. So I think that, you definitely benefit from both sides, but, they give you totally different things.
What ratio? Like, how much percentage do you think you should be doing?
Personally, for me, I actually think it's more a 50-50. Because I reckon 50% defensive skills, 50% offensive skills is for me the perfect mix.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I know myself, when I roll lower belts, maybe I've got the wrong attitude, but I try and allow them to experience some success. Maybe it's because for me, when I was a lower belt, I just had no success, and it was just crushing to just be tapped out like 4 or 5 times per roll was just demoralizing. And I want people to continue. I want them to succeed. So I'll give them space. I'll give them openings. I mean, sometimes to the point where I'll say, hey, you could have had this here, or you could have had that, or whatever, and let them work a bit. Otherwise, if they're just getting tapped out over and over, like I said, it's really demoralizing. Like, nobody, they won't stick around.
I don't like, personally for me, it's sort of funny being in this kind of, I hate hurting people. Like, I can't stand it. So I guess
keep off the old block.
With me a lot. I'm not there to kill anybody, and especially that. And not to mention, you change over time. So for me, probably my students laugh at this when I mention it. But so when I started jiu-jitsu, I was 18 years old. I was very lean and shredded and fought very, very hard. And I got given the nickname the Assassin. Then fast forward, 15 years later, I'm getting bigger and fatter and slower and whatever else. And one day there was a rumor that I had gotten side control on someone and fallen asleep. And but, they still couldn't get out. And so I was given the nickname the Walrus. So for me, it's sort of, I always think about that transition from being the assassin to the Walrus.
The Walrus.
They're not,
Man.
It's very different, like, I don't like, I definitely don't like beating people with speed and like power. I like to just be nice and technical and try to just say, for instance, if I've got a mount, I'm not just trying to rip their faces off. I'm just sort of just practicing staying on top and moving around a bit, and because the last thing you want to do is really just maul somebody who's just trying to figure out a few things while they're training. And
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's my goal. I want to aim to put someone underneath my side control and just be so relaxed that they think I'm asleep. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I, just like you, Kim, I like to let them advance a long way, like right to the end, and then work back from there to an offensive position, and then not tap them, or say, or just let them know that they could be tapped basically there. But like, I like to get as deep into trouble as I can, so I'm in full defensive, and then get back to offensive. And I find that that's like following that whole progression through is good too for me.
Can backfire though.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, wait, gone too far now. Now I come back out.
I actually, funnily enough, I used to do a lot of that, but now I've sort of moved on from that, because I just found that every now and again you'd let somebody get into a dominant position and you would think, okay, they'll look after me, but then they did something that hurt me, and not necessarily a submission hold or anything, but just a stray foot to the face or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
So I found once the injury rate started going up, I started reducing the amount of chance they'd get to injure me, basically.
We'll have to say on this show that white belts are the most dangerous people on the planet.
They are, and you can never, like, of the millions of reactions that you can expect, every now and again someone's going to do something and you're like, what the hell were you thinking? I heard about one guy complaining, some guy grabbed his finger and more or less did a cartwheel with it, and he's like, what the hell? Like, so I'm big on trying to survive nowadays. Like, the wheels are falling off and I'm trying to keep them on,
Yeah, fair enough.
And Pete, let's switch tacks a bit to Anton always uses the word powerhouse, but there's no other word to describe your club. Bayside is an absolute powerhouse. Like, anyone that's been on certainly the Melbourne competition scene will see you and your team there in most comps and putting on really dominant performances. Like, you're nearly always medaling, always. I mean, you're always there in every corner that I can see, like, coaching really hard. Tell us about this club. Like, how did it come about and how did you get so good?
Yeah, well, it's nice that people are noticing that as well. Like, so for us, as mentioned, we've been running for just over 7 years now as a club, and we've just just pre the pandemic, we moved to a full-time facility. We were previously in a church hall, and probably as far as the competitions go, I think I'm getting a lot more people having a good laugh about. I'm probably getting a reputation as the craziest coach at each event. If there's any person you can hear screaming louder than everybody and running the most around from one mat to the other, it's definitely me. But
you're even outlasting the Brazilians sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, look, for me, it's very much a case of I always wanted to be the instructor that I wanted to have at competitions. So for me, unfortunately, Peter was so involved with the competitions that he had lots of other responsibilities. So the majority of my competing, I didn't have my instructor in the corner. And to be honest with you, more often than not, you didn't even have your teammates or anything with you either. You just go in alone. Maybe your family was watching, and that's all. Whereas for me, I definitely want to be there with my, every single body that I can. Grappling industries are like the craziest days of my life. There's a match on every minute, and I'll yell, scream, whatever, and then I'll be sprinting to the next mat literally all day long. but I love it. Like, it's amazing. And my students as well, I think what's, I guess, most unusual is that our club's very small. Like, I mean, even we're a one location club, and we've got, just over 100 adult members. And we go to most competitions, and we end up with like over 30 competitors. That's including the kids. So all up, we've got about, say, 250 members at the club, and we can go to most competitions. We have usually sort of mid-30s as far as people competing. So it's a crazy ratio, I mean, of competitors. But I think for me, I'm a bit obsessed with the self-help books and things like that. So I'm very big on just really encouraging people and impressing on them that the losses set you up for the wins, and the wins set you up for the losses. So you'll have, I think the best one I ever heard was, I heard it from Buchecha, and he was talking about how, I think it was the first 8 competitions he went to, he lost every single match. Wow. And then here he is, probably I think he's got the highest amount of absolute black belt wins in IBJJF, history. And to start from somebody who literally won nothing, constantly, just lose.
Amazing.
But
imagine he quit.
I look at it very much as, can you imagine the balls on that guy to just lose and come back and come back and come back? So I'm actually a firm believer in, the job we have is to get better than ourselves. It's not really about the other person. So if you lose, it's fine. You've got lots of things to learn, lots of lessons to gain from, and then you're going to come back better, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to get better and better and better. And I've got, for me personally, the students that really blow me away are the ones that actually keep losing and can come back for more. It doesn't bother them at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, like my personal goal with competing is just to show up and actually be fully present from the getting to the venue, or actually the night before. Be present from the night before till the night after, and just not go internal and kind of just lose track of what I'm there for and what I want to work on and all of that sort of stuff. Like, for me, that would be the greatest competing achievement, regardless of the medal. Like, I just know I'm not fully present the whole time, and like the development.
There's definitely a big difference in the attitude for the competitors, for the older, like the Masters division guys versus the adult division guys. Absolutely. And I've got to say that, so for instance, for us, we had one of my students, Peter, just was awarded his purple belt at the club on Wednesday night. He's 56, and he managed to medal. So he's got himself a gold at the recent nationals. I got himself a gold at the recent Vics. And I mean, the reality is, gold medal aside, being able to compete at 56 years of age is a massive win on its own. Yeah. And he's done it multiple times. Like, I'm absolutely, like, for me, the guy's, he's one of my heroes, basically, because I'm thinking into my 50s, and I'd love to think that I'm still, rolling and, still functional.
Absolutely.
And tell us about how you started it up. So you said you started in a church hall. Like, what was the decision? So you were kind of working your job. You've been doing jiu-jitsu already, 15 years, and then you sort of thought, I want to do this a bit more, or how did it happen?
Okay, so for me, so as I mentioned, I started training in 1996, which, it's so funny now, most of the people that sign up are actually younger than that year, which freaks me out.
Born after then, yeah.
But so I started training, and funnily enough, back in those days, there was no instructors around. Like, there was very little. So I actually started teaching in 1997, and originally it was at Deakin Uni. And what we would do is we would find empty classrooms and just move the tables and chairs out of the way, and a handful of me and some other random guys would just start rolling. So that was my first club, I would say. Wow. And then in 1998, I started teaching at Monash Clayton, and we used to hire a squash hall, and we used to use the mats from the judo club and just set them up and muck around. So I did that for a little while. Then we also started a club at Monash Caulfields, and Monash Clayton actually asked us to leave because they already had a Japanese jiu-jitsu club. So they sort of said, like, we want one jiu-jitsu club, and they're already, they were here first. So that was fine. So we moved to Monash Caulfield. I'd probably say at that point it finally got some traction, and we had quite a few numbers. But I then relocated to Sydney for a few years, so we sort of stopped doing that. When I was in Sydney, I was training with Marcelo Hazen from Gracie Barra, and I actually eventually started a club in Hurstville when I was in Sydney. It ended up being for about a year or so, which again, just no traction. I mean, you almost feel like back in those days, hardly anyone knew about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and to try and bring people to you was impossible. It was so hard to get people to find you. So
was this the early 2000s?
Yeah, so the Hurstville club. So at the end of this chain, we're looking at about 2004 at that stage. Okay, so again, it was very, very slow. It was very, very hard to get students and everything, and you'd teach and you'd hope people would find you, but there wasn't a lot of tools to find clubs. And I mean, if I look back at my own example, if I hadn't had a friend tell me that Peter Devine was teaching in Hyatt, I don't think I ever would have found him otherwise, because those were the good old Yellow Pages days. Be looking through, and if you were lucky enough to have an ad somewhere you were looking, you were blessed. But it was really, really hard to find clubs and places. So funnily enough, fast forward, so it was, where we get into 2016, and I'm just working my regular workers' compensation job, bored out of my brain, and out of nowhere I got a message from an ex-student who just sort of said, "What are you doing? We used to love your classes. Why aren't you teaching anymore?"
Wow.
And I got the message, and I just sat there and thought, why aren't I? Like, what am I doing? So I was, bored out of my brain at work, just like, maybe that's a good idea. So it started to just sort of settle, and I started to think about it more and more and more. And at some point I thought, yeah, why not? I might as well run a club a few times a week. I was starting to get a lot more injuries and stuff, so it's getting harder and harder to go to training. So I still wanted to remain involved with jiu-jitsu, despite, all of the injuries that I was going through. So there was a church hall that was 100 meters from my house. I managed to get them to rent out the space for, Monday, Wednesday night for an hour each night. And I bought a whole hoard of jigsaw mats that we'd keep there, and you'd show up each night and you'd put them all down, and people would come, and then you'd pack them all up. And funnily enough, I mean, it just kept growing. I think I started with about 3 or 4 people who came in, and next thing you know, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then I added more nights, and it kept growing, and I added kids, and it kept growing. And I think the space, I think we had an area where about 20 people was literally, I didn't even think it was safe at that point. It was dangerous with 20 people. It was a very small area surrounded by steel chairs and then windows. So I think we got up to about 28 in a class, and I was like, we can't do this anymore. So we started looking for a full-time facility, and we made the switch. So the new area, it's it's a huge area now. Moved to, so we're now in Mordialloc. It's just, I hadn't planned to do this full time, but this time around, it just took off. It really did. Just kept growing and growing, and here we are. It's crazy to think the grappling industries that happened very recently. We came second for the adult team.
Wow.
Which was, we got one of those the balling, those massive medallions, which was pretty funny. I thought it would take a while. So Flavor Flav style, I got to wear that around one night. That's it's a huge achievement for us, because of course Absolute came first, but Absolute has 3 locations.
Exactly.
And AET came third, and they've got multiple locations, and we've just got the 1 location. So it's it's an awesome result for us.
We've also got Lockie Giles, so
well, you do what you can, but
yeah, that's right. But it's funny, like you were just, when you were telling that story, and that is an amazing story, and congratulations. It actually reminded me of how I ended up at my club, because it was at Absolute. Because back in the day, like the internet hadn't really fully taken off, right? And so you had to name your business something that started with like, that's why it's called Absolute MMA, right? Because it's like AB, right? So it's the yellow pages at the top. Like, you know, if there was an Abacus MMA, I probably would have ended up there. And I definitely would have ended up at like Zebra MMA because they would have just been too far down the list. But yeah, man, you know, nowadays we just find clubs based on location and based on reputation and great coaching and great culture and all of these sorts of things. But there was a time where you just couldn't do that, could you? You just had to literally look at the yellow pages and you'd pick the top one, you'd go have a look. Yeah.
You would literally, I mean, it's something people don't understand now. I mean, you pick up your phone and you go into Google Maps and you type in whatever you want and you can find it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
You find, you know, going back 15, 20 years, you'd literally have something next to you and you'd only find out about it 5 years later and you're like, oh my, you know, like, oh my God.
You know? Yeah. It's like a whole different world.
Yeah. So it's, and I'd say that's the big difference with actually finding people and getting them to your club. They can find you now, whereas in the past they couldn't find you. You had to work really hard, and you know, putting ads in local papers and things like that. It's, you know, it's still not going to get a lot of traction.
Yeah. And nowadays also you put it on social media, you go, hey, I'm looking for a club, you know, over down near the beach, and then, you know, people get stuck going, oh yeah, Bayside, you got to check it out, this and that. Like that kind of social networking referral system is really powerful as well.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. You see it all the time. I mean, if someone says, oh, I'm moving to Melbourne, you'll get a stream of his 20 clubs to choose from. I mean,
that's right.
It's a different world. Like, it really is.
Mm.
We're nearly out of time. Do you have any final words, any words of wisdom? It's been great. Awesome.
I'd probably say to anybody out there that the thing I'd like to focus on is for those that have either not started jiu-jitsu yet, not given it a go, or those that are a little bit more frustrated. I'd probably say, look, try your best to enjoy yourself. As far as clubs and stuff go, I mean, for me, very much, I think culture is the most important factor of any club. Find a place where you like the people and you have people who are going to look after you. And especially in my mind, you should be making friends at your jiu-jitsu clubs. Like if you're going in and you can't count a whole horde of people that you count as a friend after a little while, I'd probably say you're in the wrong place. But very much, you know, I'd say for me, it's really, I like that adage that it's problem solving under pressure. I think there was an old, a lot of people thought of us as thugs or that we were just mauling and beating up people, but it's not my experience at all. I mean, the last thing I want to be doing is hurting people. I mean, it's just amazing how you can do something that just keeps evolving and changing, and new techniques and all sorts of things. And I personally have never found anything as challenging or as interesting, and that's pretty much what's kept me going. And it's something that I think everybody should give it a try. Obviously, some people love it, some people hate it, but you know, jiu-jitsu has given me so much, and I really love sharing it with others. And
beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that with our community. Appreciate that.
That's awesome. And to think that you may not have actually been here as part of this community if that 120 kilo dude had not walked in 25 years ago. So everybody that's listening, just keep plugging away. I guess that's the thing. And hopefully eventually everything will kind of slowly start to make sense.
Yeah, and maybe get out to Bayside and Pete can fall asleep while he's in side control on top of you, and you can experience
the Walrus.
Come roll with the Walrus.
I don't know, mate. I don't know if we're putting that on the banner, but
we'll find a better one than that. And I'm banning, Anton, I'm banning you from using the word powerhouse too many times. Too many times.
How about Rockstar? Can I use Rockstar? Yeah. Okay, you're an absolute rock star, man. Thanks,
Anton. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pete. I know it took us a little while to get this happening, so I really appreciate your patience. And if you could share this with your networks, this would be really awesome to help grow our little audience. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you at the next competition, probably screaming and running around between mats to all of your students. So can't wait.
Thanks so much, guys. I love chatting with you, and yeah, look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Sounds awesome. Good, Pete. Cheers.
See ya. Bye.
Peace out.